topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Are you ready to take a journey? Let's connect with the healers of the world. It's that time. It's time for the Language of Healing on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Now here's your host, Emotional Wisdom Training Specialist Nicole Fortin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Language of Healing on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. I'm your host, Nicole Fortin, and today we're talking about caregivers and caregiving and how we give and receive care and what all of that means. And now there's so many variations of a caregiver. There's so many meanings of what that truly is. You could be getting paid for it in the healthcare industry. You could be also caring for child, parents, pets, friends, other family. There's, or even the caregiver of the earth. And so there's so many ways that we can relate and connect with this. And one thing about caregivers is they're very heart-centered, right? Caring. I think of the Care Bears and how they shoot out of their hearts and just caring and emanating this. But what are the pros and cons of that? I mean, we need caregivers and we love and appreciate them and all that they do for us. They do so much more than we realize. And there's times then when that can get out of balance, when maybe there's too much giving and not enough receiving. So you're giving more of yourself, more of your time, energy, and not leaving enough for yourself. And that, as we know, will lead to, fatigue, exhaustion, burnout, a whole variation of illnesses. It really depends on your body, what's going on, and how it's, I want to say like managing stress or processing this kind of stress or burdens or being overwhelmed with it. And something I encounter on a regular basis, being in the healthcare industry, doing acupuncture and Chinese medicine and massage therapy and yoga and emotional wisdom training. They're all great modalities of providing support and care for others, and also I've found for myself. So I'm actively using these modalities for myself to care for my body and my mental health and physical health, spiritual health, because caregivers are often also aligned with some purpose, right? We feel like pulled to service and giving. And this is how we contribute to the community, but how can we do it a little bit better with us as the main center point, always taking care of ourselves and then expanding that out, that reach out to others and being there for others. So our guest today is Kat Kohler Schwartz, and she is the lead instructor for the Emotional Wisdom Training Institute and a coach, and has a whole pile of wisdom that she's going to share with us today. So let's welcome her onto the show. Hello, Kat.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi. Hi. How are you? Where are you calling in today?
I am calling in from St. Louis, Missouri, USA.
Wonderful. Yeah, great. And so what's inspired you in the caregiving realm to speak about this and offer support for people?
Well, what really sparked my interest in it was my daughter became a nurse quite a few years ago, and she asked that I bring her lunch up on the floor that she was working from, and I went up on the floor and I couldn't find her. There was no one at the front desk. And I thought, wow, where could she be? Usually there's someone in the nurses' lounge. Well, they have nurses' lounges, but no one really spends a whole lot of time in there, I found. And so I saw out of the corner of my eye these people darting in and out of rooms. And I thought, who are these people? And I realized it was the nurses. The nurses were literally running from one room to another, providing care. And they would go into the nurses' lounge, take a bite, and then go back. And so it really tugged at my heart. I remember when my daughter first went into nursing, she's like, Mom, I can't even take a break to go to the bathroom. And I said, oh, you'll find your way. You'll find your way. And eventually she did, but it took many years. But that's just what sparked my idea of we really need to help caregivers. And I myself was a family caregiver from the time I was 19 years old. I had a child with cystic fibrosis. So I became sole caregiver for this child from the time he was born until he flew the coop when he was 20 years old. And that's so I do have a personal experience with it. And I managed in-home health for quite a few years, watching nurses and home health aides, care partners take care of people in the home. I took care of people with dementia for some friends. And so there's a whole host. And I also take care of parents right now. I've been taking care of them for the last few years. And so there's just different varying ideas of what a caregiver looks like. They could be paid or unpaid. So that's what brought me to this today, to really recognize our caregivers.
And what's something then that you've noticed in working with those caregivers that, where's the, so I don't know, where can you fit in? What support can you offer them? What are you seeing that they're maybe struggling with, and what can you offer?
What I find with caregivers, some of them are in this because they're maybe they were single parents at one time, right? Or they were still single parents and they needed to find quick education to get them some support for their children and manage a home. Caregivers are one of the number one underpaid professions in the world. And so you look at that and you wonder, how does this happen? Because they not only give from their heart in a nursing home or in a hospital or in some type of care setting. It might be a psychiatric hospital. They go through a lot throughout their day because they're constantly moving. They're changing bedpans, or they're listening to the patient and what they have to say when they have someone in the next room that needs a bedpan change. And they are judged by all of that. They are graded by hospitals and healthcare facilities. And when they get home, they're exhausted. They're completely exhausted. That's 12 hours. They no longer have 8-hour shifts. They went to 12-hour shifts quite a few years ago. Why they did that is beyond me. It's probably has to do with a dollar, but they went to 12-hour shifts. So if you can imagine running constantly, giving your emotion and giving your physical body in whatever sense it looks like, whether it's changing bedding or it's taking care of a blood pressure or whatever, you're constantly moving for 12 solid hours with maybe a minimal break to the bathroom. So what I notice is when they go home, they have to do it all over again. They have children at home. They have spouses that they have to care for. They have bills to pay. They have to take care of their home. They have to make lunches for their children the next day. And they're constantly giving again. And what I find, and when I worked in healthcare, home healthcare, I noticed that the women really were depleted of their energy. And sometimes that came back to work. Sometimes that came back as anger or anxiety, or they couldn't just get a thought together. And I got many calls because of that. I would have to talk them through it and get them through this anxiety. And so they're missing out on taking care of themselves. And some things that we can do to help caregivers is, if you're in a leadership role in the community, recognize the caregivers, give them like these, maybe a spa pass for a day. I mean, what does that cost a spa owner for one day for a couple caregivers? Or maybe provide some childcare for them. Just volunteer to take care of their children while they just go out and maybe go to the spa if they can afford it, or maybe get their nails done. I mean, just little things, or just even give them a card to a coffee house. I mean, that's just a big deal, because they can't, the caregivers, their care partners and home health aides, they can't afford those kind of things. So those are just some little things that they can do that we can do to help caregivers.
So being like aware and recognizing what they do, maybe being underpaid, underappreciated, undervalued, overworked, and not much time for themselves. So that's how we can support them a little bit. And then with, I imagine then it's like, it comes back to a choice too. When you're running in all of that, all the tasks you're doing and all the people you're caring for, really consciously making that break, if you can build that in, or like really honing in on the importance or the value of that, because it's so easy to brush ourselves aside, right, when we're caregiving. And I'm speaking from experience, like, I'll say because I can really relate to that, and I don't think I'm alone in that, but that is something that is the struggle, is like putting yourself aside. So, what might inspire someone to really, like when you were supporting someone with anxiety or anger, these frustrations that come up, what is something that you help them remember, so to speak, to work through that?
Yeah, a technique that I use is just speaking when I speak with them, and I might see them in the hall of a hospital, or I might see them in a grocery store. You can identify them a lot of times by the scrubs they're still wearing, because they didn't have time to change their scrubs. They had to go do the grocery shopping right from the hospital or the medical facility. So sometimes if I recognize the anxiety, I will walk up to them and just say hello. And of course, in COVID times, that's a little alarming for some people. But before COVID times, we could do that. And I might ask them, how was your day? And they might just spill it all, And so then once they get through that, I can say, look around you. Look around you. What do you see? And what do you want your day to look like? Just those simple words. And then they can say, well, I want my day to look like, like I've been to a spa, right? Or I want my day to look like just stress-free. I don't want any stress, because now I have to go home and take care of children. So just stop them, just to stop it, slow it down. And this is a form of what we call emotional spinning. When someone is in deep anxiety or depression, depression's high among caregivers, especially unpaid caregivers. And so we try to address that as best we can, as far as coaching someone along those lines. Just to give you some statistics, in 2009, and the statistics will be in the show notes that I gave you, but in 2009, they did a survey, and the value of services that family caregivers provide on an annual basis is $375 billion. $375 billion. That's all unpaid value. So that's huge. And further, like the family members that are caregiving are 49 years older or older, and they're married, and 66% of them are female. and they still have children at home. So they're caregiving with someone who is either a parent, a friend, and then some of them are caring for children with special needs in the home and working. And so you can imagine the kind of anxiety or depression they might experience as a caregiver. They feel all alone because no one else around them knows how to do what they do and do it well. And so there's also a trust factor there too, like trusting that you can call someone, you can allow someone to take your place for just a few minutes. And so that's a part too, that anxiety comes from that, like giving up control of being the caregiver and being able to receive. Caregivers have a really hard time with receiving because
almost like the martyr, it's like overwhelmed with all the things, but no, like not delegating it out or not sharing the tasks or even training someone how to do the job that you're doing. And then it's like, oh, I'm so overworked, but never really asking for the help and support you need. So that, I imagine, is something that can be worked through.
Yes. And there's some ego attached to that. Believe it or not, caregivers do have an ego about them. They want to fix things. They want to help people and they want to fix people. And so there's always this need to fix or do. And so what they're actually doing when they get to these depressive modes is they've just depleted all of their energy because they're constantly on. And there's a reason for that. The reason behind that is very deep. And so when I coach someone, I get to that deep level of what is the reason that you feel the need to be a caregiver? And some people will say, well, I was born to be a caregiver. And that may be true. But to know what's the reason that they really want to be a caregiver and live in that language in their mind, being a caregiver. And sometimes it's just fear of allowing themselves to be vulnerable, right? They're already vulnerable to a point and to what they will allow, but being vulnerable in really knowing who they are. And so they keep giving and giving and giving and giving. And that's that part of the ego that we need to get to. It comes from the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is protecting us all the time from different things that we do or things that we've done in the past, excuse me, and the subconscious mind has labeled those events, incidents, or accidents that have occurred in the past. And so when we have this ego, we're constantly living in the past and not willing to live in the present. So those are some things that we go through when I'm coaching with someone and I ask them, where are you right now? And then we go from there. We meet them where they are.
Right. So if I'm understanding, what you were saying about the vulnerability piece, is that maybe we put up this, we'll call it a front of caregiver. So your attention is always on someone else, fixing them, helping them. You feel like you're doing something good for you because it comes from your heart. I want to help and support. But to be more vulnerable would be to look at what's behind that. Yeah. Like, what is the driving belief or motivation to being a caregiver? What beliefs have you noticed that come up with your clients?
What belief I've noticed overall is that somewhere in their childhood or youth, they have had to care for someone before, like maybe a mother or father who was ill, or they had some mental incapacities, and they were very young, and they were forced to care for someone. So then they keep caring and caring, and as a child, you create these labels. You label things and you don't realize, you don't have enough information at the time when you're young to know that you're actually labeling something bad. So when you get older, you realize that okay, I'm a caregiver. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what the language in my head says, right? And so we don't realize we're doing it, but it is a factor in how we conduct ourselves with that language in our mind. Now, that language in our mind can go back as far as before we're born. There's they can pick, the child, the baby can pick up on tonal language outside the womb. And so we start forming these opinions and values and beliefs before we're even born. And so it's natural to see that when we're a child and we begin the experiences on the planet, that we're going to naturally just apply some type of belief or value to it, unless someone else tells us that it's that. And so when we collect these over time, it measures up to, I'm not good enough, or I can't do enough, or that person is always better than me. So these kinds of phrases go through our subconscious mind, and it sticks until we realize that it's there, and then we can unwind all of that and track it. And that's what we do with coaching, is that we unwind all of that. We unpack all of those memories and labels, and we only stay there briefly because we don't want to kind of wallow in it, because we'll stay there. We won't be creating any new kind of language. And then when
that emotional spin you were talking about.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The emotional spin. And so once we can identify it, we, meaning the coach and the client will ultimately be giving all of the information for themselves. And the coach asks the questions and guides very gently. And so when we discover that language, then we can move forward very quickly and create this new pattern of believing that these situations that we've experienced and labeled really mean something more than what we've labeled it.
Mm-hmm. So then there's really more going on to it.
Yeah.
Wow. So I'm interested then, because of the Emotional Wisdom Training Institute and what it has to offer, and speaking about languaging and our beliefs that we've put in place into our little structure growing up, and and I was just remembering or just reminded about how many children have to grow up too soon, right, to care for someone, or there's value in like creating this independence with children, right? But maybe giving, if they have too much, then there's not really that focus of self-exploration. As a kid, your imagination is free and expansive, and you're just discovering things that you like and meeting new friends, and not fully developing with that. I can just see that these beliefs that are running throughout adulthood often come from something childhood programming.
I've had a couple clients along the way who grew up with that task of taking care of a parent. Both of them had parents that were mentally ill, and it happened to be the mother, and the caregiver happened to be a girl. So when a girl's growing up, they need that nurturing from their mother to show them how to care for someone with open heart, with the stability that it takes to take care of someone with effectiveness. And both of the clients realized that they were not allowed to grow up. They were not shown how to caregive without the anger in their heart, or without the anxious feeling that their loved one might vanish, without, and they would blame themselves for that. In fact, one of them, her mother moved away without telling her, moved away completely. And then another one, her mother died suddenly, And so there was no closure in that. And so this anger was still in their hearts. And after both clients stayed with me for a good year, and after that year, they found that they could reprogram this and go to that vulnerable place without staying there and without feeling it so much in their body that they can't function. So one of the clients actually had fibromyalgia, and she attributed that to this constant giving with anger in her heart, and her mother constantly telling her that she was never going to measure up. You're nothing.
Right.
And
that's such a difficult position, because then like the intention of a caregiver is from, the big heart wanting to help and support. But, if you have these running beliefs that are there and you're caregiving out of fear, guilt, shame, like necessity, I have to do this, then I can see how that can be very depleting. And then leading, year after year of that environment, you're not really fully honoring, your soul, your body, mind, spirit. And then this low level depression can creep in because you're not really honoring or valuing your gem. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, it's just interesting to see, to hear you speak about that. And, what's the intention behind, what are you doing the caregiving for? Like you ask your clients, there's quite a bit to unwind with that.
Yes. And so it's not surprising that both of these individuals became caregivers as adults. So they knew nothing else, right? And it was just ingrained in their bodies that they're supposed to be a caregiver. And one of them became a social worker, and another one became, she was marketing, but she was always going outside of the United States to help women or help someone. And so she found herself constantly giving. And so now, I mean, both of them, I just really am so proud of them, because they can see now, they see the language that's occurring in their mind. They can see it through their mind's eye now, right? And so they can identify it. And now they know that, oh, that's my vulnerable spot. That's what got me here. And I know what to do with that now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you can shift, like with that new information, shifting your perspective or changing up the reason why, right? Like, what's the motivating? So you can make a more resourceful choice for yourself and for the others. And I think that ultimately creates more care. The ability to care is bigger when there's that like neutrality.
It also has an effect on the body too. Like when you
are
absolutely constantly reprogramming, right? But it takes a long time to program those feelings and emotions into the mind, from the time you're born until present. And then it takes some time to unravel some of that, unpack it and identify it. But it also has the impact on the body along the way. So for example, the person who had fibromyalgia, she's not able to undo the fibromyalgia, but she can see now how that works for her and be able to understand it better versus, they're going to go through that spin cycle again of what happened to me, why is this happening? And so when we then reprogram the mind, we are also shooting off new neurons in the brain, which is very healthy for our bodies. And how you hear experts, you read these things in AARP all the time, where learn something new. And this is why they want you to learn something new when you're a senior citizen, so that you are constantly firing new neurons in your brain, which keeps your brain healthy. Same thing applies with neurolinguistic coaching.
Yes, of course. We have such capacity to grow and expand, and we hardly touch on like the full aspect of that, or the full spectrum, right? So we have to work on that. There's a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself that I really enjoy, that I go back to often, because, about doing something new, or just breaking that habit, just, you have to shake it up. And I read somewhere about this June 2021 being about shaking it up, just like shake, reorganize. I'm also thinking about this natural tendency that we have, or it's like an innate desire, I believe, to want to bring balance to something. So, when I see it in the body a lot, there'll be an imbalance, and then the body will compensate to correct it. So, we could have a little twist in the hips, and then there's torso twists, and then our head kind of, it's like all trying to keep balance and in alignment. So the body is so smart. It's doing the best that it can with what it has. But I love that idea of unwinding the physical body, but also rewiring and unwinding the brain chemistry too, and how that works together. There's also Gabor Mate. Are you familiar with his work? I saw him speak once, and this story really stuck with me, because this is like quintessential caregiver, I believe, or that one aspect of it, that programming of, he was born in, or conceived in, a very unstable environment in like Eastern Europe. And his mother had that fear of not really wanting him, because it's like, I'm pregnant, but there's so much instability around me. So it's not, so there's that fear that's being fused into him. And then he grows up to become a medical doctor, because he's not wanted. So he's going to make himself be so wanted and needed as, to be this medical doctor. And so it was really interesting to hear him speak about that realization of, the body really picks up and mirrors these things. And it's interesting what careers we get into, or situations we encounter because of these habits, patterns. I don't know what you call it, but
you mentioned caregiving for pets, and I have to say, like the son that I mentioned a while ago, who has cystic fibrosis, is still living with us. So he just turned 41, so we celebrate that. And not many people make it to that age. I think the average age right now is about 30, 35. And so we'll take it. We'll take every moment. There's new therapies and new research out there that's helping cystic fibrosis, the whole community. There's only about 30,000 in the world. So it's one of those orphan diseases that gets less attention. So notice that when he was born, his insides weren't connected, and so we were in the military, and we had to medevac him to another state in order for him to get care, because they didn't have a pediatric surgeon on the base, and so they medevaced him up to another state, and they call me and they say, well, we don't have a pediatric surgeon, but we have an adult surgeon. I'm like, well, we have minutes here. We have minutes for this boy to live. And so the adult surgeon allowed me to vent for a little bit. And then he said, well, ma'am, I did do my residency in pediatrics. I'm like, well, what are the odds of that? What are the odds of that? But this is how my son was born. I mean, he was born without his plumbing hooked up, and he was immediately, from the time he was born, medevaced to another state without his mother present. And so today, and he went through some tough times. I mean, he went through some really tough times as a teenager, and his identification, how did he identify with the world? Because he was different. It was really tough for him. And as an adult now, he cannot have children, but he and his spouse care for animals. And so Their animals are like their children. They will do anything for their animals. They have a cat and a dog, and at one time they had like 5 dogs and 2 cats. But yeah, there's that deep sense of caring that is even in that place where you're the person being cared for sometimes. And so,
Right.
yeah, so he cares for animals.
Mhm. I love that. We had a question. Roxy, could you put that back up? Can it go the other way where after caring for others as a child, that then when you become an adult, you then get as far away from your family as possible to cope?
Yes.
That's a great question. Thank you, Heather.
That is a great question. Yes, I could say that for myself. There are times when I just want to go off to Hawaii somewhere. I'm caring for 2 aging parents, and like for the last 6 months, we've been downsizing their house and moving, and it's been very challenging to care for my mother. Caring is a caregiver for my father, and then I'm caring for my mother with her emotions and taking care of that. Yes, if there are times when you just want to leave and go, you just want to get out of there and just leave, but because you have this obligation to them, you stay. And it's not uncommon for caregivers to move away once the care is complete. I have known many a caregiver who have moved out of the state to be away from the person or people they were caring for. And I'll tell you that a lot of times the families that surround the caregiver are not always supportive. It's easy for them. And I saw this in home health. It was rampant in home health, where the family members always wanted to comment on what the caregiver was doing or what they should be doing or what they're not doing. And it was always this place where you're never wanted. You feel like you're never wanted or you're never supported. So it's up to us as coaches, when we see this and we get these types of clients, to give them the utmost part of our hearts as we possibly can, and to support them in every single way we could possibly do it, whether it's finding outside resources too, like just little things to do to help them feel like they're wanted. They have to feel that in their own heart. And then once they learn that over time, those other people are not going to even matter. That's the part of coaching, the style of coaching that I do and that Nicole does, that it builds that strength within the person. It builds that heart strength that people crave, but they're not realizing that they don't have it. So when we're saying things like, I don't want to do this anymore, I can't keep going on, I just want to, some people just want to die. I can't tell you how many caregivers that I've coached that wanted to die and realized, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And then they carry on and they're like, what, a year later, they're saying, what was I thinking? So
Yeah.
you really have to give them a special kind of care from our hearts as coaches.
Right. And, not every situation where you're a caregiver is fair and just, like to be just thrown in, or, you don't have control over that. And so I can see where the desire to maybe like remove yourself, that is the control part. It's like, I'm going to take myself out of this element. But it brings me then to an interesting thing you can maybe help us around, because in emotional wisdom training, which for those of you who don't know is, a type of psychotherapy, talk therapy, where we're using neuro-linguistic programming and rewiring the brain and, dealing with feelings, thoughts, and beliefs. But essentially gathering the information that's going to make a difference for you and how to master your emotions. So you're responding more wisely versus reacting emotionally to what's going on. And we use a series of principles, practices, processes to help support that work. And one of them is the idea of moving away from, away from something versus moving towards something.
Yes.
And So, if you're in a difficult situation where you don't have much control, and there's like resistance to it, how might we be able to get more acceptance around that, so there's a bit more space and flow, so, and just reshifting maybe like the intention, because sometimes we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Something you can do at home, or, I had a friend who was a caregiver for a hyperactive son, and she used to lock herself in the bathroom for 20 minutes. And so that was her way of coping with it. Like, if she said, if I don't lock myself in the bathroom for 20 minutes, I'm going to kill him. And he was very hyperactive, very opinionated as a young child. So, I mean, aside from that, something that you could simply do for yourself, and it's a mental gift for yourself, is that it's called the state of being. And so you can you start where you are right now. What are you feeling? And you put that in. I usually put it in the left hand because I'm right-handed. You put the negative emotion in your less dominant hand, and then you take the emotion that you want to feel in your right hand, and then between the two, there's this neutral line. So let's just say I'm experiencing anxiety today because my mother didn't want to stay away from going to the grocery store. She was supposed to stay home today, and she can't walk very far. And so she did not want me to go, right? Let's just say that for a scenario. And so I'm experiencing some anxiety, maybe some anger about it, because it's such a simple thing for me to go get some groceries and then bring them back, versus having to stop and go and stop and go and wait for her to decide what she wanted, and so those aren't bad things, by the way. Those are things that we do when we get older. We take longer to decide. But as a caregiver, it's like you want to get on to the next thing, right? You need to do the laundry yet, or you need to take care of dad yet. And so you put that feeling in your left hand, and then that feeling is anxiety, and let's just add anger to that. And now you can close your eyes, and then in your right hand, you can imagine what you want to feel. What is it that makes your day? And for me, that feeling of joy, that feeling of freedom, and that feeling of just going for a walk for like 20 minutes would relieve some of that. And so then I ask the person to go back to the center and look at, literally look over at that hand and say, okay, that's my anger. That's my anxiety. Okay. And then now I'm looking over at my right hand with that stress-free walk. Maybe it's in the sunset. Maybe it's in a woodsy area. And what that feels like, and embody that feeling. And then you're in that neutral ground. Back again, you're looking at the neutral ground. And you might even now put that negative feeling over your heart and feel what it feels like. What does that feel like? Is it heavy? Does it make you shake? Does it make you angry still? And then you take that away. You don't want it to stay there very long. And then you take the hand, the dominant hand, with the positive feeling, and you put it over your heart and feel that feeling of stress-free, the wind blowing in your hair, a walk. And what does that feel like? I want that, right? And so you take it away. Again, you're in neutral ground, and you look at each one and you say, which one do I want? Most often people are going to say, I want that stress-free feeling, right? Of walking in the forest with the wind blowing through my hair. You get to decide. We are the only species on the planet where we get to decide our emotions. And so we can take this exercise and say, this is the one I want. This is the feeling I want. And apply it to your heart and get rid of the other. The other, it's there. It's going to be there forever. But to acknowledge that it's there and identify that you have a choice. And so now you can be stress-free. You can go for that 20-minute walk, because there are 24 hours in a day, and feel that sense of freedom. And you can apply that over and over and over.
Yeah, I love that. That's so easy. And it's the perfect, like, putting it in your hands, like moving away from, moving towards.
Yes.
You know, there's a natural calm relaxedness when you're clear on what you want. I want that feeling. And then that changes your whole frequency. Like, it just changes. But you mentioned something interesting, about the anxiety, like, oh, she wants to go. It's just going to take too much time, right? Like, it's not that big a deal. But I think this is what where the slow leak of caregivers comes in. It's like the little stuff that, adds up eventually. And if in that moment you could just switch frequencies, really, it's like put on a new suit. Like, okay, I'm feeling anxious and depressed and a little mad and frustrated, and it's like, okay, just what's the feeling that I want? Like, change the suit. Yeah, and even if in that moment it provides some joy or some relief, that's the subtle change needed to rewire the brain.
Yes.
Because that will become, like opening the file, like we keep adding to that file, so it's like bigger and thicker, and it's more easily accessed when we're feeling a bit stressed. But I think this is important with the caregivers, because, oh, what do I have to complain about? People have it worse. My life isn't so bad. I get to help and support others. And so you never really take that full look at, like, what more might be going on. And then you never address that. And then it's just this low level depression, anxiety. You're like, I'm not really honoring,
And it takes time. You're not going to do it overnight or with just one exercise. It takes time, because we've programmed this into our mind over years of thinking that way. That's the language in our mind. Right.
So we have 2 minutes left here. You have a course coming up.
Yes.
And
I have a course coming up, and it is on time and our relationship with time. And this is the perfect time, really, for caregivers, because we're still in that COVID place of taking care of people, and maybe post-COVID taking care of people because of the complications that COVID brought to that person who has it. So I know that the caregiver increase has increased in the home by 10 million from 2015 to now, and so that's a lot. And so I'm in this class. It starts June 24th, and it is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it is a 12-week course. If you want to just check it out, you can come June 24th and check it out, and you can access the information by just emailing me or texting me. You can text me at 314-359-2467 and just text healing, the words healing, and then I will send you all the information. And then you can visit either my website, which is in the information below, right here, or you can go to the Emotional Wisdom Training Institute.com website and also check out all the things that we provide. And I instruct for them, and I coach on my own through my own business, which is called Taproots for Life.
Okay, good. Thank you so much, Kat. So wisewomenglobal.org or emotionalwisdomtraininginstitute.com to find out more, and contact Kat. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a real pleasure to talk with you, and I hope that this gives some good food for thought for listeners, and to all the caregivers out there, love.
Thank you.
And freedom. Okay. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Wow, what a show today, and the journey does not stop here. Come travel the world with Nicole every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, as together we become more fluent in the language of healing on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. See you next week.